Join us for the Career and Technical Education event of the year. ACTE's Career Tech Vision happens this November 29th through December 2nd in Phoenix, Arizona, and is the largest annual conference in the nation for CTE educators, business leaders, and industry professionals. Last year, the event attracted more than 6,000 attendees. At Vision, you'll forge meaningful professional connections with educators and industry leaders. You'll expand your professional development in hundreds of concurrent sessions, workshops, and tours, and learn from innovative keynote speakers and leaders on the Vision main stage. I'll be at the Career Tech Expo, checking out the hundreds of exhibits, workshops, and live demonstrations, and in the Career Pavilion, learning about high-demand careers and the learning systems that prepare our students for them. Don't miss the ACT Awards Gala, where we'll celebrate the enormous contributions of our CTE educators. Choose to attend in person or remotely. For all the information on this terrific event, visit careertechvision.com. Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kirkner, and in this episode, we are reflecting on all the great things that we learned at TASC, the Automated Shop Conference in Novi, Michigan, where machining companies from all over the United States and beyond, and suppliers of amazing automation technology to those companies converged to learn about the future of manufacturing. The event was sponsored by organizations like Gardner Business Media, Modern Machine Shop, Production Machining, and the Tech Ed Podcast had a huge role as the co-technical director, along with Modern Machine Shop's editor-in-chief, Brent Donaldson. We did a series of interviews with the featured speakers to learn where manufacturing technology is going, and it is our pleasure to share those with you in this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. Welcome back to the Tech Ed Podcast. It is your host, Matt Kirkner. We continue to be on location in Novi, Michigan at TASC, the Automated Shop Conference, where we have manufacturers, especially people in the world of contract machining from all over the globe, converging here to learn about the latest in advanced manufacturing technology, recruiting talent, understanding how to deploy automation, understanding Cobots. I've learned so much. We're continuing to learn so much, and we are about to learn even more. Of course, being here in Novi, Michigan, not far from Detroit, another area that isn't too far from Detroit is Auburn Hills, Rochester Hills, Michigan, Automation Alley. And if you don't know what I'm getting to now, you will know in just a moment that that is the home to the largest robotics company in the world, at least their North American manufacturing and sales operations and service operations. And that company, of course, is FANUC America. And we are absolutely honored to be joined by the Executive Director of Global Accounts, Jerry Perez, from FANUC America. Jerry, it's awesome to have you on the Tech Ed Podcast.
I'm excited to be on this Tech Ed Podcast. I've listened to it, so it's an honor and privilege for me to be here.
You always exude so much energy, so much positivity for the world of manufacturing and the world of automation. So I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Now, most of our listeners, because they're plugged into advanced manufacturing, they're plugged into education, they're plugged into manufacturing technology, know FANUC America. But for the one or two people that maybe aren't totally familiar with the work that you're doing, give us the quick elevator speech on the importance of FANUC America and what you're up to.
Sure. I mean, FANUC America, you think biggest and the best in terms of robot automation. We just crossed over the 1 million robot ship mark, right? 1 million robots out there. It's hard to, to get your head around that. But we've been doing this for many, many years. We're headquarters here in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Yep. But leaders in robot automation includes CNC controls. We even have machine tools, which a lot of people don't even know about that part of our business, right? But that's us. Automation, our message this year is where there's automation, there's FANUC, right? So if you can think about that, where there's automation, there's FANUC. That's us.
FANUC really is synonymous with global manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, which is why we're so excited, I think, to be here at TASC, Jerry. I've just been absolutely amazed. The questions coming from people, the curiosity, the inquiry that we're seeing around advanced manufacturing. A lot of these companies are already well on their automation journey. Some of them are just getting started, but no matter where they are, everybody just agrees that we have so much optimism for the future of manufacturing. In my case, American manufacturing, huge advocate for that. So we're really, really excited excited to be here with you. I'm excited for this talk you're going to give this afternoon as well. A lot of times when we think about automation, when we think about integrating robotics, people are thinking about the large Fortune 500 brand names that everybody knows. And the truth of the matter is that there's this huge opportunity in our small to mid-sized businesses around deploying automation. And I want to say that your topic this afternoon relates to how small to mid-sized companies can leverage collaborative robotics, cobots, in their manufacturing operations. Is that right? What's that one message or that one takeaway that you want your listeners to walk away from your presentation with as they go back to work from wherever they came from here in the United States or around the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the talk I'm giving, and at this conference, right? And maybe I'll preface it with this. I'm typically advising Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies at a global, those large companies that we think have introduced and implemented and deployed robotics throughout their company, right? That is an assertion we make.
Right.
And something that I've discovered is, and I've consulted with smaller companies and implemented, even myself, I work for a small manufacturer where they said, can we just get one robot in, right? The challenges the large manufacturer faces, or that small, job shop, medium shop, small shop, the same. And one of the challenges that I see common is the skill sets you need when you're identifying which system, which system do I want to automate? What tool am I going to use? That comes with experience. And whether you're a large company or a small company, that experience has retired. That experience, has gone out to, different integrators. As our whole, marketplace has grown and grown and grown, the amount of resources required to implement it, program it, but also even figure out the process for how to identify which is the right application,
right?
That also has retired, or it's gone thin, right? So whether a large company or small company, I feel that I'm advising the same, type of advising and answering the same type of questions.
Sure.
Whether large or small.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's one of the messages I want people to take away from the talk today is, even though I'm a small company, wow, there really isn't in reality this, I'm a small company, I only can do these things, as if these other larger companies don't have those challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, we still have to identify constraints. We still have to figure out, is it a quality issue? Is it a throughput issue? Is it a customer experience issue? Is it a changing features and benefits of products on the fly, which we're now doing even more of in American manufacturing as manufacturing moves closer and closer to the point of consumption. So all of the same things that a large Fortune 100 company would deal with, similar problems and challenges that we're dealing with in a small to mid-sized business, maybe just at a little bit different scale and possibly with fewer resources to be able to respond to some of those challenges. And so in as much as some of the challenges that the small to mid-sized companies face might not be too much different from the large companies, talk about how both are using collaborative robotics to solve for manufacturing problems.
Sure. Part of the title of the talk today is the Cobots being the first choice with a long-term view of success. Right. So how, whether a large or small or a large company, they don't have the resources necessarily already that have the skill sets for programming,
right?
Identifying, I just said this, identifying which application to deploy them at. So a Cobot, it's easier to program, right? I try to shy away from the word easy, right? Because we're still talking about robotics here. So it's easier to program, easier to implement, right? I can move it around by hand. It has a much more positive experience.
Sure.
I call it that threshold when you're learning something new, you know?
Absolutely.
There's like that kind of pain threshold of like, I don't know how to learn this, right? Cobots typically have a much lower threshold of for learning something new. So whether you're a small company, large company, when you don't have the resources available, Cobots are easier first choice.
Sure.
Right? Kind of the gateway for, future automation.
Absolutely. We all see applications in manufacturing where, high precision might be required or huge payloads or, mean time to failure being 50 plus years on a robot or something. Cobot maybe not the perfect solution for that, although it could be. But to your point, we've got these opportunities to do things like lead through programming and block programming, make the robot much more relatable. I almost think about the world of welding and manufacturing that I was involved in, now increasingly becoming automated using robots and cobots as well. But one of the challenges there was actually getting somebody into the weld booth, right? I mean, they were afraid. As soon as the sparks start flying, as soon as things heated up and you were laying a bead, that started to be a little bit, intimidating. In the same way with a a complicated, maybe a more complicated robot where you're understanding Cartesian coordinates and you're doing point-to-point programming and so on. It might be a little bit more of a threshold to get over a robot that's moving at 750 millimeters a second. That can be a little bit intimidating for folks as well. So this whole world of collaborative robotics where we can get right in the work cell depending on the application with the robot and work hand in hand with it, a much, much more, I think, low challenge way for people to get into the world of automation and robotics.
Totally. And, we're talking about cobots working with people, right? Collaborative, that was the initial design.
Yep.
And the reason for collaborative robots was to work alongside people.
Yep.
But one part of my talk today is about how we actually relate to cobots.
Yeah.
And it really is ease.
Mm-hmm.
It's that low barrier to learn something new, the ease of programming. It becomes more about easy, flexible, versus it has to work next to somebody, right?
Absolutely.
And that's, in reality, we're FANUC, we're always talking about the end user or the integrator or do-it-yourself. Do your risk assessment, right?
Right. Should
I have a fence? Is this product sharp I'm going to be carrying around?
Yep.
We're talking machine tending.
Exactly.
Machine tending, you have sharp bits that come off of it, right? Machine.
Exactly.
It's like, is that going to be safe to have somebody around? I don't know, but cobots are easy to program. It's easy to teach my next part. Somebody gave a talk yesterday about, might take you 4 hours to learn this cool new technology that's going to transform my business.
Yeah.
But it only takes me 10, 15 minutes to teach my next part and the next part, right?
Yep.
Great for a job shop. So, even though we may not work next to people, cobots, we're thinking now easy, flexible, low barrier to entry. That's kind of, you think about the word cobot, I think that's how the market relates to that today versus just working next to somebody.
Absolutely. I had a conversation last week with our mutual friend, Mike Chico, the president and CEO of FANUC America. I've known Mike for a long time. And he said one of the things that he loves is when somebody brings a new robot or especially a cobot into a manufacturing operation is that they give it a name and they actually refer to it in the first person. Exactly. Yeah. And he's like, it just makes it more relatable. And I think this whole idea of collaborative robotics, it's more relatable, it's simpler, and it's less intimidating. And in so many ways is revolutionizing manufacturing. It's going to be fun to be in the world of manufacturing for the next 5 years. One of the things that I admire, Jerry, about your role in manufacturing is you really get to see cutting edge application of automation and advanced manufacturing technology. You are working with some of the most advanced and recognizable names in manufacturing that are deploying things that would have been unimaginable 5 or 10 years ago. It's got to be incredibly rewarding. Is that what you love most about your job? What do you love about being the executive director of global accounts?
I mean, solving large company challenges, right?
Right.
So a small company challenge, a large company challenge. What's extra cool about a large company challenge is seeing a company have a vision for implementing automation, which is implementing automation, 2 words, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But the work it takes to actually see that happen. So one of my favorite parts is having a vision for something and then seeing it in place.
Mm-hmm.
I get twofold. I get both the non-physical thing, right? Seeing a strategy in place and then seeing numbers of robots get deployed somewhere or deploying it. Let's say, hey, I'm a job shop, or I have one plant and needs one robot. And then, we got that done. But then actually seeing the physical thing happen.
Right.
So the new technologies that weren't available, there's challenges applications that customers asked us to do 20 years ago.
Yeah, right.
That I worked on myself with my hands trying to make it work.
Yep.
And we did have some of these cool, automatic path generation programs.
Yep.
Right? We had Gray Matter talking at the conference here, right? Automatic path generation. And we did that. I remember doing that in 2008. It cost $2 million to do that.
Wow.
$2 million for one system.
Yeah.
And now they're deploying these with this robot as a service model, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, don't pay for it until it starts working. I'm like, this is working right here. So I call them automation enabling technologies.
Yep.
One of the great, benefits of working at FANUC, of being, the leader of the best, is we have access to not just our products, but the top leading edge technologies, which make the implementation of robots a lot easier. I don't have to know how to code. I don't have to know how to set up vision, right?
Right.
I mean, I have a robot. I need it to touch, see things.
Right.
Before, even 2-3 years ago, you might have to set up all these programs to do all to set up your vision programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's companies where I can just send you an image, send you a file, and you automatically generate that for me. That is automation enabling technologies.
I mean, it really is. It's not just the robot. It's all of this integration. It's all this technology. You talk about automation enabling technologies. I love that term. I'm sure that's one of the trends that you're seeing in the world of manufacturing is just the advancements in so many of those spaces. One of the things that we're curious for the folks we're chatting about here at TASC, Jerry, is as we look to the future of automation and manufacturing, you look out 5 or 10 years, what are some of those trends, or maybe one in particular, that you think is really, really driving change in the world of advanced manufacturing?
Sure. I think so. One of the hot markets we've been going after has been, the warehouse logistics market.
Yeah.
You think about automotive 20, 30 years ago, and that was the market where there's going to be thousands of robots.
Right.
And now there are.
Yeah.
Our customers buy thousands of robots. And, warehouse logistics, this is going to be a market where there's going to be, we're forecasting, thousands of more robots.
Right.
What comes out of that? Look at that problem statement there in a warehouse. I need somebody moving boxes.
Right.
This, in terms of a lots of labor, but I'm not moving 150-pound parts, right? So these are lightweight robots that have to move around, and typical industrial robots, 480 volts. So I need 110 volts, or maybe I can drive down to lower DC, driven motors, right?
Sure.
So you take a market like that, and maybe what comes out of this new general purpose type robot, somewhere between collaborative and industrial robots, where lightweight, just enough payload, easy to power, can stick it on top of an AGV or an AMR, right?
Yeah.
I start to see markets like that start to influence making products available now, market wide.
Absolutely. So what happens in one specific market, and the nice thing about the logistics and distribution market is they can do it at scale. I mean, everybody knows the big brand names that are responsible for making sure things arrive on our front step when we, a day after, or sometimes the same day that we order them. So those companies are deploying these at scale. They can standardize, they can make investments, they can take some risk because they've got the capital to be able to do it. And the rest of us end up being the beneficiaries of that because they're doing the, kind of the R&D on their own, coming up with the use cases, the applications, and the financial justifications for doing it, and then the rest of us learn from that, and it just really totally changes entire markets, and that's going to be exciting, I think, as you suggest the idea, about robots becoming even more deployable, even safer to work around, having all these different applications, being able to change the application, right? So we don't necessarily have to automate a work cell to make the same part for the next 10 years. I can use a collaborative robot, a hybrid robot of some sort, doing one operation, and maybe in 2 months my process changes. Now I can reprogram that right in-house for another application. I think it's going to be a fun time to be in manufacturing.
It is, because these new technologies, maybe one market creates these technologies, but gets deployed across multiple. Look at these hot markets. Here we are, machine tending shops, right? Small, medium job shops. But what's the difference between loading a machine versus loading a fryer?
Right.
Loading in the fast food restaurant, right? These services for a lower cost, easy to program, easy to deploy, work around people type product. Look at those two markets there. Tons of job shops that probably could utilize automation with the labor shortages.
For sure.
Same thing in the food service industry, right? So we've got our eyes poised on taking some of these products and getting to deploy them in all these other markets that could absolutely use them and are ready to receive them.
Yeah, one of the most exciting things about automation, I think people that aren't in the space maybe think about, when they think about automation, they see a video of a big three automaker or what have you that's using robots and have for decades to assemble cars, to paint, to move material, and so on. But there's all these other applications in every single market space. You talk about food production, that's huge. Logistics and distribution, that is huge. Contract machining, machine tending. I mean, it's just awesome. And I can't imagine a better person, Jerry, than you to sit here and have this conversation around advancements in manufacturing with all of your experience, all the different applications you've seen, and all the amazing companies that you had the opportunity to work with. Really appreciate you being here at TASC, sharing that vast knowledge with the audience here, and being here on the Tech Ed Podcast, sharing your vast knowledge with our audience. Can't thank you enough for your time, and really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
I can think of no better guest to join us than the managing director of Silicon Valley Robotics, also the vice president of global robotics for AMT. Her name is Andra Kay. Andra, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much. I'm learning so much while I'm here, and I'm enjoying the conversations.
As am I, and you're here all the way from Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley to Detroit is a pretty long way to travel, but certainly worth the time and the energy, I'm assuming, based upon all the things that both of us are learning while we're here. And I understand that you're here not just learning on your own, but also conveying some of this incredible knowledge that you have on the rest of the attendees here. We'll get to that in a minute, but for the customers and for our audience, I should say, that maybe aren't perfectly familiar with the great work that AMT is doing, why don't you tell us a little bit about AMT?
Right. Possibly, even if you haven't heard of AMT, you've used something like the MT Connect standard, allowing machine-to-machine communication. And that kind of is a foundational building block. AMT, like Silicon Valley Robotics, is an industry association, so dedicated to supporting the companies that are growing the manufacturing industry, and dedicated to creating a good ecosystem so that we get the best companies that we need doing the jobs that need getting done.
And as we think about the future of advanced manufacturing, that's exactly what we need, right? We need the absolute best companies, the best talent, the best innovation, the best ideas, and we need all of that to converge in ways that really drives robotics and automation forward. I can tell you that it is certainly in my career, and I've spent 25 plus years in manufacturing now, absolutely the most exciting time to be in this space. I'm going to say in the history of the planet, fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Perhaps people felt the same excitement when robots first came onto the shop floor, but that was 2 generations ago. What we now call a robot is significantly different. The capabilities are, well, you would not call an old industrial robot a robot by any standard today. What we now call a robot is far more complex and sophisticated. But there's still a real disconnect. This is very early stages of the new evolution of robotics. And something that I like to say is a famous quote, "The future's already here, it's just not very evenly distributed." So the sort of robotics that you see that seem available and obvious in the Silicon Valley region are not widely available. And many people here are working without access, without knowledge of what is going to be available more broadly in robotics and automation. In the same way, there's also a disconnect from seeing how robots are being applied in real work use cases and allowing entrepreneurs to actually understand that more deeply and meet some of the real pain points. Some of the most successful robotics entrepreneurs and companies are founded by people that have both deep experience in robotics, but also deep experience in the industry that they're developing robots for. And we need to close that disconnect. We need to bring the workers and the company owners together with the robotics company founders and developers.
And it really is about, I mean, you can think about taking somebody who's an expert in robotics, an expert in automation, understanding the applications of robotics, but not necessarily understanding the use case within a specific industry, a specific manufacturing operation. And it feels a little bit like that's part of the disconnect that you're referring to, is that we have to really, you can't just take Industry 4.0 technology, smart sensors, smart devices, automation, and become an expert in that and walk into a manufacturing operation, a food production operation, a distribution operation, and pretend to know how to put that technology to work in a way that's going to benefit that individual operation. Is that what you're getting at?
That's exactly true. I think systems integrators have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They go out there and they search for the latest technologies, and they're responding directly to what the end customer is needing and looking for. But at the rate that the industries need new robotics and automation, and the options in robotics and automation are growing, I don't think that we can keep up. We are seeing a kind of collapse with the development of a collapse of the middle, with the development of no-code solutions, for example. A number of the robotics companies, representatives speaking, have talked about how these days you buy the box with the robot in it and you look at the manuals and watch the videos for a day. You can be directly empowered to be using the technology. And those are fundamental principles of good design. That was really one of the points that I wanted to make in my talk, is we don't need to teach our toddlers how to use smartphones and tablets. They learn that rapidly all by themselves. We don't need to teach our kids how to play computer games, or even our adults, and I confess to having played computer games myself.
That makes two of us, by the way.
And what we learn in that process, can we be applying that to the way that we're using robots and automation? So solutions where we abstract away the complexities out of a robotics or automation solution, or an AI solution, where it becomes as transparent as possible between saying, I need this thing to do that thing. And let's not worry about whether it's coded in Python or C++ or any of those minor details.
it really becomes a democratization in so many ways of some of this technology. You think about block programming, you think about lead through programming in the old days of robot programming, and there's still some of this going in and understanding Cartesian coordinate systems and understanding, point to point programming and explaining exactly what a robot and where it needs to go using Cartesian coordinates, telling the gripper to open and so on. In the evolution from that to being able to lead a robot through a program with your hand to things like block programming and understanding that we don't necessarily need to know all those programming languages in some instances. And what I hear you getting at is that we will reach a point at some time where we're using artificial intelligence and we're just basically saying, using voice recognition, I want the robot to do X, Y, and Z. And there will be a platform working in the background with some algorithm that will say, okay, I heard this, and it will program the robot for us. Is that really where you think we're going?
We're already there.
Awesome.
And that's kind of another of the points. I hope I actually demonstrated that on stage. I can enter a voice command, look for the red ball and pick it up. And my little robots, my robot Dot Mini, it's a lot smaller than a Spot, runs that through RoboGPT, and I can watch it spitting out the Python code for that. And I don't need to know it, though. I don't need to watch it.
Sure.
It then executes that code.
It's a generative pre-trained transformer for robotics is what I'm hearing you say. Absolutely fascinating. So if there was one takeaway in that presentation that you want to make sure stuck with the audience and sticks with our audience here on the Tech Ed podcast, what would that one thing be?
Oh, I'm going to have to go for two.
Okay.
And the first one is start simple.
Okay.
You don't have the option of not using robotics and automation because everybody else is, and you are getting left far behind if you do not take some steps forward. But don't aim to solve the biggest, hardest, worst problems that you have. Aim to solve something that's very simple and easily repeatable. And even just the amount of extra capacity that frees up for you, not only will it be more productive than you think, it will be far less likely to go wrong, and it will allow you to develop an ownership on the process of automation. You'll find, and so many stories of this, where the staff start going, well, heck, if the robot can do that, can I get it to do this over here and that over there? And that means that you are owning the process. And I think that's really the way you have to do it. Start small, but get started.
Just get started in automation. Don't fret. Don't sit here and argue about it. Don't worry about how you find the perfect project. I think to your point, find something where we can use automation. Let's get started with it. Let's learn from it. Let's not wait because everybody else is moving ahead. We're going to learn some things in the process. Just do it and get started. And I think that's one. You said you had 2 points, right? So what's the second one?
And the second point is really complementary to that, because those people that got started, 5, 10, 15 years ago on this process, they bought the largest, most expensive, most complicated systems compared to what is available today. It is of an order of magnitude cheaper. I mean, my little Dot Mini is 100 times cheaper than a Spot Mini is. It just gives you some idea of the affordability and the accessibility and the ease of use of a lot of the systems that are coming out now. So it's going to be a lot easier for you to get started.
Absolutely. In many ways, the whole idea of automation robotics is kind of following that same path that we saw with Moore's Law, where products get, they double in price performance every 12 to 18 months. And we're seeing that in automation now. What we can do with a robot, maybe twice as much as what we could do 18 or 36 months ago, probably at half the cost and probably at half the complexity. So it's just such a really exciting time to be sitting in this world of automation, of advanced manufacturing, of Industry 4.0, seeing the world change right before our very eyes, literally right before our very eyes, and things that we're talking about today and using terms like GPT today. If we had mentioned that 2 years ago, 99% of the world would have no idea what we're talking about. And today, everybody can relate to it. Amazing how fast this technology is moving. And it's also amazing some of the trends we're seeing in automation and advanced manufacturing. And Andrea, in as much as you're working with manufacturers all over the country, all around the globe, seeing some of the most trending advancements in industrial technology, tell us about, if you could pick one trend that you see in advanced manufacturing or in robotics or automation that our audience should be keen to and listening to, what would that be?
Again, I'm going to go for two. I don't see as many mobile robots being used as there could be. That is the largest growing area of robotics in primarily logistics and back of house operations in so many places, a lot of manufacturers. It's now one of the largest segments, but I still really don't see that in most manufacturing.
So you're talking about autonomous mobile robots. So in other words, like what I would call driverless fork trucks, but they're using artificial intelligence, machine learning, LiDAR, 3D cameras, all kinds of really fascinating scanning technology, and then cloud computing. So you literally have a ground-based autonomous mobile robot moving material around a distribution or logistics or manufacturing operation, but doing it autonomously. It's as if there's a driver in there, but it's doing it on its own. Is that the first trend that you're pointing to?
That's exactly the first trend. And many of these are collaborative. They are designed to be safe for people to walk around and work around. And many of the other trends that we're seeing in this is retrofitting existing equipment. So if you've got a pallet jack or a forklift, it can be retrofitted and become autonomous, and it can also be hybrid. So you can drive it manually, or you can just say, okay, now I've driven it over here and I've done something, go back to base without needing to have a person tied down to what is often the highly repetitive traveling, transit times, and material movements. We need to start thinking about every part of every process and every machine as becoming mobile.
Absolutely. That's a fascinating thought. And when you think about, I'm a big fan of the work of Taichi Ono several generations ago now in the Toyota production system and the 7 deadly wastes, and transportation being one of those wastes. And we start to think about how we can drive transportation waste out of a process using mobile robotics and mobile systems. Feels like that's exactly what you're pointing to. And it's a huge opportunity for us to reduce cost, bring more and more fascinating products and amazing solutions to more and more people, make the world a better place to live, which I really feel like we can do through automation. Is that fair to say? Is that the way you think about it?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things I'm incredibly enthusiastic about, is that for starters, most mobile robots are electric, and we are seeing a reduction in the carbon costs of utilizing and replacing a lot of carbon generating equipment. We're also seeing, ways in which we start rethinking supply chain, and we start reducing the number of steps along the supply chain. If we can empower small, medium enterprises to be able to produce a full range of products, then we're bringing local manufacturing really back. And I think what excites me about robotics is that I really believe that we're moving away from the mass manufacturing and mass agriculture, mass every industry, back to local scale that's better for people, better for the economy, and better for the environment.
No question about it. I talk often about the pandemic was such a challenging thing for the world to go through, and everybody has probably a dozen stories of just tragedy and all the hardship that everybody endured. One of the silver linings, I believe, as a result of going through that was that people who before really had little appreciation for supply chain and manufacturing because they could get what they wanted when they wanted it at a price that they were willing to pay, and all of a sudden that whole world goes away and you can't find things as simple as toilet paper in some cases. All of a sudden you have a really good appreciation for how important it is to have manufacturing closer and closer and closer to the point of use and consumption for all of the reasons that you mentioned. And robotics and automation in small to mid-sized businesses adopting that technology are probably the biggest key to seeing that renaissance, which I believe we're already seeing, not just here in the United States of America, but around the globe. Such an exciting time for us to be involved in the world of manufacturing, and really an exciting time for us to spend some time with Andra Kay, the Vice President of Global Robotics for AMT. Andra, thanks so much for being on.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure being at TASC and being here on the podcast.
We are on location in Novi, Michigan at TASC, the Automated Shop Conference. It's been a phenomenal time, and we are going to extend that phenomenal time with our next guest. His name is Steve Alexander, and Steve is the Vice President of Operations and Standard Products at ACETA. We're going to learn a little bit about ACETA in just a moment. We're going to talk about how we calculate in really creative ways the return on investment for deploying automation and manufacturing. But before we do that, Steve, I just want to welcome you here to the studio of the Tech Ed Podcast. Thanks so much for being with us.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Matt.
So you're here all the way from Southeast Wisconsin. You and I are here now in Southeastern Michigan, just outside of Detroit, Novi, Michigan, to be exact. And you have a pretty important role as a VP at ACETA. Just start out telling us a little bit about what ACETA does, and then how you partner with manufacturers and others to automate their operations.
Sure. So ACETA is a robotic integrator, and we've been in business for a little over 40 years. Our main core business is custom design solutions that tackle the labor shortage issues. So we focus a lot around machine tending, material handling, welding and fab, and as well as material removal. So aside from just the custom side of our business, we also have a standard products division, where those are going to be pre-engineered solutions with quicker deliveries and a lower entry point cost.
So you've been doing this quite a long time. You've got the standard products part of your business. You have the custom solutions part of your business. All of that plays into, I'm sure, this topic that you're going to be talking about. Believe it or not, ROI is something that fascinates me, and how we justify investments, capital investments in manufacturing, something that I find really, really interesting. So tell us a little bit more. Tell us about what are those hidden factors? How do we need to be looking at return on investment in this new day and age of automation?
Sure. I mean, I think on the surface, most people have, a spreadsheet which compares the initial investment versus the labor savings. And even though typically you're going to find that those spreadsheets will still tell you that automation is a good investment, sometimes there may be a longer return on investment there that may make smaller shops shy away from. And so that's really where we need to look at the big picture when we talk about return on investment, because, there's a lot of things beyond that really affect the bottom line. And when we look at those hidden factors, it's things like consistency. And it actually is a big one. When you have operators doing things, sometimes the consistency is not there, or sometimes the task that they're supposed to do, it just takes a lot of effort. And so it's not the same consistent product every time. So when you introduce automation, once that process is proven out, you're confident that robot is going to produce the same end result time in, time out. And really, with the consistency side of it, aside from having a better quality product, you reduce scrap, and scrap is a cost that can be greatly reduced from that. There's other large things that you have to consider with like lights out operations. Many times, you just don't think you have the capacity for a second or third shift because you don't have the employees. Once you add automation, you can start to do that. You can start to add a second and third shift, and that right there, it can really accelerate the return on investment on a second or third shift. But things like employee retention as well. That's a big one today, because one, it's hard to attract employees, and it's even harder to retain employees. And so, when we have these dirty or mundane or jobs that, typical employees don't want to do, you're not going to keep them around long if you expect them to be doing those tasks. And that's really where we introduce automation. And automation can do these tasks and open up these higher paying, more challenging jobs for your employees, which will lead to more, happier employees, which leads to longer retention. And really, when you look at the cost of hiring somebody, I think they estimate, you can assume it's a third of that position's salary per year just to hire and onboard an employee. So you don't want to be doing that often, because that's lost money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think about all the years that I spend in manufacturing, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but 25 years, chief operating officer, chief executive officer of several manufacturing companies over the course of almost a quarter century. And it really was the old model of ROI, right? It's like, how much is this going to cost? What is my cost reduction, whether that's labor or materials or what have you, and then do the math on it. And people are always surprised to hear that, my target was always a 6-month payback. And I would go as far in those days as 18 months. And if we had to go further than 18 months, in other words, if I was going to invest $100,000 in some solution, I wanted that $100,000 back in the form of cost reductions over the course of a year and a half. And if I couldn't get it, then we would go looking somewhere else. And I would say there's got to be, and you could always find something, there's got to be something better. When we think about automation, we call it the kind of the long view of return on investment. You got to expand that discussion beyond just what are my actual cost reductions, to your point. And we start thinking about all of the other benefits that come from automating. You mentioned consistency. Absolutely. We have a more consistent product. We're improving yield. We're probably, we're not making mistakes on the line. We're probably improving line uptime as a result of that. We have this opportunity to redeploy our people, as you discuss, and it's kind of hard sometimes to quantify what the value of that is. But tell us a little bit, Steve, about for that employee who now has their job freed up because of the manual labor they were doing is now being done using automation. What kind of opportunities exist for those folks?
Typically, when you take the operator away from running a single machine or performing a single process and letting the robot take that over, the operator now becomes more of a cell controller, a cell operator, and someone that can take control over multiple cells and not just one unit. But it also it opens up opportunities for them to learn things like robot programming and process improvement and maybe gauging and quality and the sorts. So it just opens up many different avenues for higher skilled positions that, what we find a lot with the younger generations is they want to be challenged. And,
right.
And, if we don't challenge them, they're going to walk out. And so things like robot programming is definitely one way to challenge them and to problem solve. And automation definitely helps that.
One of the things that I often comment on is when you hang out with people that are doing robot integration, when they're executing on automation projects, where they're integrating programmable logic controllers and robots and conveyors and smart sensors and smart devices, and even getting into some of the data analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on. You listen to people talk about that, and they almost talk about executing on automation the same way that people of my generation talked about working on their cars. And they'd be like, somebody would have this, whatever they did, they put a new exhaust system on their car that created a different noise, or they put some different tint on their window. And, oh man, that is so sick. And now you've got these guys that are talking about doing the same thing with automation. And it really is, when you talk about the importance of retention, you talk about just the excitement of working around automation. These are really cool careers, aren't they?
They are. And I think, what's really exciting is moving forward here. The word cobot has really been thrown around a lot in the last few years, but in all actuality, it has opened it up for these individuals to come in and mess around and try to find different ways to utilize a robot and really just move the robot around to different areas of the facility just to see if they can accomplish a different task with it. So, it's a lot of discovery for them, but as I mentioned, a lot of problem solving, and it opens the door up to be creative like that.
I think the advent of cobots for a couple of reasons, and you mentioned certainly one of them. You think about, and we're still going to see the kind of typical standard 6-axis robot arms and so on, and there's a lot of applications for those that maybe when it comes to precision or payload and so on that a cobot can't necessarily mimic, at least not at this point in time. But when you look at the advent of cobots, number one, the way that we program them, and when programming a traditional robot, it's really showing that robot a point in space, a Cartesian coordinate, and saying, go here, open the gripper, kind of programming the whole thing. Now we have lead-through programming where you can literally stand right next to a cobot and program with your hand. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have all of this experience, depending on what the application is. Allows us to be a lot more creative in trying different things, seeing what's going to work. And then, of course, the other aspect of an individual being able to work in the same work cell safely with a robot. If I have a traditional robot that's traveling at 750 millimeters a second, I'm not going to want to be anywhere near that thing when it's doing its job, right? But with a traditional cobot that knows I'm there, that is going to move itself out of the way if I'm in the way and so on. Lots and lots more applications. Is that the kind of thing you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I think one of the biggest things, underlying things that cobots have brought is that it has reduced was the fear factor of robots. It's when you look at a robot behind a cage or in a cell, it's kind of intimidating, right? And you can't get near it, and you feel like you really don't have control. But when you put a collaborative robot in front of somebody, they feel like they have control. They can grab it, they can move around, they can program it. It just takes the fear factor right out of it. And it's the ease of use, and so maybe even beyond that is things like HMIs, the human machine interface, how you interact with the system. And as those improve, software improves, it makes it easier to interact and one, to understand how to interact with robots. But the collaborative side is really what I think is opening up the door for that ease of use and making people more comfortable with automation. And I see that trend really, really expanding. And like what we find is even on the collaborative side, typically those robots are slower, right? Because there's less safety, and they stop if they bump into you. Well, we're finding a multi-use form, if you will, because we will fence these robots in and we will put them in high-speed mode out of collaborative mode. But then when an operator comes close to cell, we will drop it back down to collaborative mode. So we found a way to utilize both the high-speed side of a robot, but yet still utilize the collaborative side to just keep that productivity up and running no matter what's going on.
Really is the best of both worlds. Are you doing that with area scanners, where you've got some
area scanners or light curtains?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really cool.
Yeah,
I love that. So, you had just a fascinating. We were talking about it as we were warming up, kind of pathway into a career. I mean, you're now, vice president of one of the, if not the most recognized robotics integrators in the country. That's got to make you really, really proud, and you should be. What is your message to a young person who is considering one of these careers in advanced manufacturing and automation and robotics and integration? If you could share one thing with them, what would it be?
I would say forget anything you've heard from your dad or your grandpa about manufacturing and what it is on machine shops or fab shops. That work still happens, but today it happens with technology. And there's so many different avenues for career growth in manufacturing. And there's so many cool things that happen on a shop floor, whether it is by a machine tool or by a robot. There's just a lot of technology that goes on. And so there are a lot of challenging positions available, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth.
Huge opportunity for growth, great paying jobs, interesting jobs, safe jobs, and just a great future, I think, for any young person in the field of manufacturing. I like that advice. Forget about what you've heard from your father, from your grandfather about manufacturing. It is a whole new world. But we are going to remember the great points that you had today, Steve, about return on investment, the great points that you had about the advent of collaborative robotics and some of the trends taking place in automation. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. You're a fascinating individual, and thanks for being on.
I appreciate the time, Matt. It was fun.
We have had speaker after speaker share best practices and innovations and trends in the world of automation, specifically as it relates to contract machining. And I can't tell you how excited I am to learn from our next guest here on the Tech Ed Podcast. He is Fabian Schmal, and Fabian is the managing partner for Bold Promises Delivered. Thanks so much for joining us on the Tech Ed Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt.
So I can't help but start the conversation by asking about this company. I always tell people, when you think about the name of your business, or you think about your tagline, or you think about your mission, just tell people what you do, right? And in your case, you're saying Bold Promises Delivered. It doesn't get much more direct than that. So tell us a little bit about your organization, how you came up with that name, and the work that you do.
Absolutely. So Bold Promises Delivered is an investment company. So here in the Midwest, we are located in Cincinnati. It was founded by my good friend Ray Artia and myself. And so we investing in manufacturing companies and renewable energy. Ray and myself both have a long manufacturing background of over 25 years. And we really want to put that to work. And I think the most important part for us is that we want to invest in companies to create good paying jobs in the region. We're not interested, sending it south of the border or to Southeast Asia. We really want to continue to grow manufacturing locally. So that's one of our core beliefs. The second part is whatever we invest in, we're trying to structure it in a way that there is some value creation and some value creation for the employees, not just for the investors. And so where we create win-win for all stakeholders, and not just the shareholders, really the stakeholders. So we look at the employees, of course, we look at customers, we look at suppliers, and have a collaborative environment where we grow overall for everybody.
It's interesting to be in this manufacturing space now as we see manufacturing technology continue to evolve in the age of automation, the age of robotics, the age of Industry 4.0. It's been a fascinating time, I think the most fascinating time in the history of manufacturing to be part of this great space. I know you're giving a presentation a little bit later on using Cobots to perform inspection operations. We've heard a lot about collaborative robotics and all kinds of robotics here at TASC this week. Tell us a little bit about the presentation, and if you would, what is that one key takeaway that you really want to drive home to the audience during your presentation later today?
Yes. So first of all, I couldn't agree more with you. We are in an exciting time, kind of like, really in the fourth industrial revolution. There's so many cool things coming up and so many new technologies. And yeah, first of all, I really encourage everybody who has not really put their toe into the water, kind of like to, actually jump right in and get going. And so today the presentation is really about not only, let's say, digital inspection, which has become a long way or actually has become very fast, kind of like to become very reliable and relatively easy to install, but then combining this technology with a collaborative robot where you actually also can, let's say with some labor or with some productivity improvements and do this without affecting your cycle time. So it's really about combining technologies, because I think that is really the key right now with all those new technologies. Everybody can buy a cobot, everybody can buy a robot, everybody can buy a camera or a 3D printer. But I really see the advantages of these technologies when you start combining it with each other, and then you really, let's say, make really fast and progress and make some big steps forward. For me, I think the number one thing to the audience is there is already so much knowledge out there. So look and reach out to people who have done it. Use this conference, connect on LinkedIn. Ask. Once in a while, maybe somebody will say no. But I think fundamentally, we're all evolving a little bit more into a space where we're willing to share more, especially if it's not directly competitor. And I really hope with the presentation to embrace, to connect people, to connect companies, that they can share with each other, learn from each other, that we don't all have to start from scratch.
In a rising tide lifts all ships, as we say, and what we see in the world of manufacturing, especially as it relates to some of these advancing technology, we call it co-opetition, and my competitor today is going to be my partner tomorrow, is going to be my competitor the day after that. And really, I think a lot of people in this space are starting to recognize that our biggest competitor isn't each other necessarily. It is the rate of adoption of these new technologies. It's how quickly can we deploy them? How quickly can we innovate? How quickly can, as several of the speakers have talked about, fill the gap in manufacturing that is being left by people, who've had incredibly rewarding careers in manufacturing, now being able to really enjoy the blessings and the fruits of all their labor, and they're retiring out of the workforce and leaving a gap. And we can fill that gap in so many ways using automation, using technology, and certainly whether that's the manufacturing side of things, that's the inspection side of things, and driving quality into the process. We can use technology for all this. I'd be curious, Fabian, to go a little bit more in detail on the technology itself. So you're talking about using cobots. I heard maybe vision systems. I don't know if you're integrating 3D scanning and so on, but tell me a little bit more about the technology and how you see that advancing.
Probably the biggest trends, of course, AI becomes really now, I think, is at a point now, especially on the inspection side and some other opportunities, starting to become interesting enough from my view, to get involved. I always look a little bit like, what is leading edge, what is bleeding edge, and I think timing is really important. When do you want to get involved? Even more exciting for me is probably advanced robots, but advanced robot, I look at it more on the, let's say, what is now available low cost. Like we looked at yesterday at a robot from, companies where you can buy it for like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. They probably don't last 20 years, but it doesn't matter. I think these technologies now, in this case, it's actually made out of plastic from IGUS, and then there are other companies out there, but what I'm so excited about, that this is now a threshold. Like there's no more excuse for anybody to get involved, because I think almost every company can risk $4,000 or $5,000 to start playing with it a little bit, and and just get into it. And I'm convinced that 80, 90, probably over 90% who are not involved in automation today and get started with it, that they will stick with it, because is a big payback, and there's just an overall big enhancement of your organization.
And it's really going to become, I think, the ticket to the dance. It's not a question of who's automating and who isn't, because I worry a little bit that those that don't in the next 5 years or so are going to have a hard time competing with the ones that do, not just from a cost standpoint, but all the other benefits that come from automation in terms of improving quality, improving throughput, and improving the customer experience, more and more options, more selection, and so on. And so to me, it's almost like table stakes for being in manufacturing. And to your point, that the cost of investing in automation anymore should no longer be an impedance. If I have to buy a $50,000 or $100,000 robot, and there's still lots of applications for those types of robots, but that might be price prohibitive for me. But if I can get in with a collaborative robot and at least get my low cost one, and at least get my toe wet in the world of automation and start learning. And then we see all the benefits that come from that. Now we can start to kind of readdress the ROI, understand a little bit that maybe a more robust investment is going to create payback because we've had a few early successes. Is that what you're getting at?
No, absolutely. And in addition to what you said, I think one is a really talent attraction. So because I think with automation and with this kind of automations, you attract talent, you give people opportunity, not only for a job, but also for a career. And, and they change maybe from loading a machine to becoming an automation technician. So there are different paths, I think, to really advance a career. But even the most important part, from my view, it creates an environment of supports critical thinking. It makes you or makes your teams eventually an incubator for new ideas when you stimulate their minds with those kind of technologies. And they are now so easy to interact with that all of a sudden the script flips around. And while you maybe in the beginning give some direction for some of those activities, eventually your team will flip around or will come with new ideas and new technologies. How do you advance your environment? How do you advance your company?
Exactly right. And so you think about the idea of talent attraction, and you think about the world that that we call digital natives. I mean, they've grown up around this technology, and even if it's not automated manufacturing, everything else in terms of scheduling and managing their calendar and staying in touch with their friends and interacting with social media and so on, all of these things in so many ways are backed by automation, backed by artificial intelligence. It's natural for them when they come into a manufacturing operation to want to work in and around technology. So it really does create, then we become a destination employer when young people can, and people of all ages can walk into a manufacturing plant and say, wow, this isn't my paradigm of manufacturing. This is technology. This is artificial intelligence. This is data analytics. It's an exciting place to be. I've got one final question for you, Fabian, before we wrap up our time here on the Tech Ed podcast. And if I'm a manufacturer and I want to get deeper into digital inspection, I'm recognizing that I can inspect my parts in process. I can perform final inspection in ways that I don't have to take, for instance, a sample size of 5 parts out of a load and send them to a quality department where people are doing dimensional measurement or thickness testing or whatever it is that we're measuring in terms of defining tolerances and quality in a manufactured part. Where do I get started with digital inspection and the types of solutions that you're going to be talking about today?
So I think the best step would be go online, Modern Machine Shop magazine. So the cover story in September was actually about the digital inspection that is made by ThyssenKrupp Bilstein in Hamilton. So amazing story written by Nate involving the team. So I would also encourage everybody, reach out on LinkedIn to some of those guys. I'm sure they're very helpful, willing to help. If you look at it, the systems are using either Cognits or Keyence. So I think mainly the camera manufacturer is a really, really good start to reach out. They have a lot of knowledge. They're willing to help. And then you look at some of the Cobot companies like in UR or FANUC or other companies are also willing to help. And then, you bring them together. And then, of course, use this conference here today. I think that's the best way to network. But if I may add one other thing, which is I feel like really, really important for me. I mean, when we see smaller machine shops, I think it's very typical that the owner, the CEO, managing director, whatever, general manager, is pretty involved in a day-to-day. And I think this is the key thing going forward when we look at automation for, let's say, medium-sized companies and especially big-sized companies. We need to get away a little bit from those constant, let's say, boardroom meetings, return of invest calculations. They're important, don't get me wrong. But it's for me, it's about return of engagement. And return of engagement is really for the CEO, for the general manager, for key leadership when it comes to automation. You got to be part of it. You just don't need to always review PowerPoint. Go on the shop floor, engage with employees, engage with suppliers, go to others and check with them, go to suppliers and check how they do it, go to other companies who do similar work, but spend more time, engage more time in those topics, and I think the returns will be huge.
It is amazing how many of the gurus of manufacturing will talk about doing exactly what you just said, and really how few leaders in some cases do it. We used to talk in my manufacturing days about going to the gemba, which, as you know, is a lean word, a Japanese word that means go to where the action is, go to where things are happening. That is how you're going to learn your business. You're not going to learn it from a spreadsheet. You're not going to learn it in the boardroom necessarily, although there's some benefits and some needs for that. But you learn your business going out on the floor, thinking all the way back to the work that Taiichi Ohno did in the 1940s and 1950s about going to the manufacturing line, watching the line operate, finding out what's working and what isn't, whether that's with the supplier relationship, customer relationship, throughput on the shop floor, or in this case, figuring out where those use cases for automation are and how you can transform an entire culture of a company through some of these advanced manufacturing technologies. And we hear about new ones every single day. It's what we love talking about here on the Tech Ed podcast. And Fabian Schmal, can't thank you enough, by the way, the managing partner for Bold Promises Delivered. I love the name of that company. And I know you're going to be doing tons and tons of good in the world of creating value for yourselves, for your employees, for the entire manufacturing sector through the investments that you'll be placing in these really cool emerging companies. And can't wait to hear more about that. And I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Tech Ed podcast.
Well, once again, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed podcast. If you like what you heard, and we know you did because we heard all about the future of manufacturing, look for TASC at IMTS in Chicago next year, where the TASC show, the Automated Shop Conference, will be embedded right into IMTS with its own track and its own opportunity to learn about the future of manufacturing. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you liked this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.